Today, we are going to be diving into negative self-talk. And specifically, if you experience a lot of negative self-talk, or if you are not very kind to yourself, we're going to dive into how you can go about starting to change that internal dialogue. How do you start to be kinder to yourself without a whole bunch of BS, positive affirmations that, quite frankly, you don't really believe in, and they don't work. They don't stick. How can you start to change that self-talk in a way that is meaningful and believable, in a way that leads to greater progress in every area of life? We're going to break it down. We're going to make it super simple. And I am even going to give you a journaling exercise that you can download for yourself for free and you can use to break through even the most toxic and challenging self-talk that's been with you for years. My name is Lindsay Pickowitz. I am one of the head coaches at the Fitness Project, where we build fit and healthy leaders. At the Fitness Project, we primarily help business owners and busy professionals, and we help them make fitness a lifestyle. That, in essence, means build a body that they're proud of, get their energy peaked, and make sure that everything that they're doing for themselves only optimizes their performance, whether it's with their work or with their family, being present, being more loving. Now, there's this one massive component of health and well-being that tends to get left off the table, and that is your mindset. People will say, just do it. You just need to get after it. But they ignore what happens between saying you want to do something and actually doing that. A lot of that comes back to the way that you think, right? The thoughts that go through your head. Now, why is it so important to talk about your self-talk? Well, if you haven't heard, your thoughts become things. Your thoughts really become the things that you say out loud, which typically translate into actions. And those actions become habit, and your habits become your life. So if you're not happy with your life or your behavior or your body, it stems all the way back to your thoughts. Likewise, if you're trying to break habits and you're really struggling, you feel like you keep sabotaging yourself, you keep stepping in your own way, no matter how hard you try, you just can't break through. Again, it goes back to your thoughts. And with that, this is a conversation we have to have, because negative self-talk, it is an insanely deceptive and debilitating habit. I know, because I experienced it firsthand for a really long time and didn't even think it was a problem. So I'm going to share a little bit of my own story. I'll keep it brief, but I hope that as I share this, it's something that you can see yourself in. And when you see yourself and you feel seen, then ideally you can take some of the same or similar action steps that I took to really get my power back, to actually start liking myself. Not just when I was doing well, but at all times. If that sounds helpful for you, then keep listening, keep tuning in, and let's dive into it. Vulnerable, full raw shares are what you can expect from me. Now, where we start is back in 2021. Now, personally, in 2021, I was almost a different human when it came to my mindset. I was so self-deprecating. There's a difference between maybe giving yourself a little bit of tough love and being self-deprecating. Self-deprecating tends to look at you as a whole and really magnify all the things that you maybe don't do right and make them your whole personality. So for me, I was really hard on myself in any area that I would deem as performance. My performance might have been how I ate that day or how I coached that week or any maybe sales conversation I was in. I took any little error that I made and in my mind, I just exploded it to the point where I would just get so mad at myself. Like I would just feel like absolute garbage anytime I made an error or multiple errors in a row. There was so much anger. There was so much negativity around myself. And it came out of my mouth, trust me. I remember going on a walk with Brian, and we'd do this around the block. We lived in Dallas at the time in our first home that we had bought. And there was this perfect little loop, so we'd walk it a few times a day. I remember just starting to spew all of this negativity out of my mouth about myself. And I just thought, man, I just suck. I can't believe I just can't get myself together. And I just keep doing the same things over and over again. Like, oh my God, I can't get a handle on this. It's so annoying. And at one point, Brian stopped me and he was like, Lindsay, you can't keep doing this to yourself. And I was like, what do you mean? And he goes, about once a quarter, you have this period of time where you just get sucked into a black hole of negativity. And you're just so mean to yourself. It's not helpful. I was like, well, I mean, I hear you. And he goes, no. Like, you don't understand. I can't keep doing this with you. I can't keep helping you or dragging you out of this pit and telling you that you're wonderful. You need to fix this. And so basically, he's illuminating this pattern to me that I literally didn't even see. I didn't think of this as like my self-talk. I didn't think it was a problem. I basically was just like, this is just how I respond when I don't do well. Like, I beat myself up, and that's what I do. I didn't think of it as a pattern I could change. I thought of it more as an outcome of poor behavior. Like, so I didn't perform well, therefore I don't deserve love, essentially. Like, I need to beat myself up so that I can right the ship. It was very much like, hey, you can't brush this off. You got to like really go to work and get better. You need to suck less. And so that was my justification for this really toxic way of speaking to myself. And I'd say that because, again, it sounds pretty intense, and honestly, it really was. Like, I would pull back from life in these little blips of time, let's say like a week out of every quarter. I would stop serving people. I would stop being so loving. I wouldn't even want to engage with the world. I'd think, man, what am I even doing? And you can feel, even listening to that, how just untrue and toxic that is, right? So not, even if it was true, that only makes the problem worse when you speak those things over yourself, right? And the challenge, I think, the biggest challenge, I think, with negative self-talk is that you shut yourself off from receiving any type of help or really seeing the problem for what it is. So it's like you stay at the surface saying, oh, I'm the problem, I suck. When in reality, it's like, well, if I were to look back, I actually was missing a lot of skills that maybe could have made those coaching sessions better or could have made those sales calls much better, right? Or have better outcomes. I was missing skills and maybe even knowledge around business or around my own habits, my knowledge. Like, there were gaps everywhere, but I couldn't see them because I was covering them with this blanket of negative self-talk. My internal dialogue said, you already have the answer, just suck less. Not helpful, right? Very black and white. Now, what did I do with this? Well, once I had that come to Jesus conversation with Brian, I realized, I really have to start changing the way I'm speaking to myself because he's right. This isn't helpful. And the truth is, no matter how well I do, I still end up back in the same place. So obviously, this is not going to just course correct itself unless I am somehow magically perfect all of a sudden. And at that point, I'll be very honest, I really wasn't quite sure what to do because it was so intangible. It was like, oh, well, I don't even know what to start changing. And so here's what I did. Basically, looking back, I can identify like six steps I took, or 6 different questions that I kind of started asking myself and figuring out answers to. So that's what I want to share with you. And then again, I'm going to flip this over and make it something that you can go and do for yourself if you really struggle with being type A, beating yourself up, being a perfectionist. Like, if you have this impossible standard that you feel like you need to reach, I feel for you. It's exhausting, right? Now, the first thing that I had to do, and that you'll have to do too, is I had to start building some more awareness around my thoughts. Like, what am I thinking about? Because even though I can say all these things that I was thinking out loud to you, at the time, I wasn't really aware of what else was going on in my head other than the very obvious, like, I suck. I'm not very good at this. Oh my goodness. Like, there were a few things that I was aware of, a few thoughts, but a lot of them just kind of ran like a record player in the background. Pretty subtle, pretty quiet. I wasn't quite sure what those lyrics were. And there's a really great quote that says, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. That's pretty much how our thoughts operate. There are so many thoughts that go through our head throughout the day, thousands actually. We aren't aware of all of them. They might just be quick observations. They might be things that we say to ourselves or about other people. There are so many thoughts that go through our head and they lie underneath the surface. The first step of change is making what you're unaware of something that you can see and that you're now aware of. Once you're aware of the problem, you can change it. So instead of just saying, oh, I need to be more positive or I need to be kind to myself, start with building some awareness around the thoughts that you already have. Now, how I did this is I went pen to paper and I was like, okay, what does my self-talk actually look like? I kind of wrote out like an internal monologue, if you will, type of thing on my paper. You can also think of this like if you want to change your thoughts, it's similar to trying to solve a math problem. If you try to solve a math problem in your head, it's going to be very difficult and time consuming and energy consuming, and you're not going to get the right answer most likely, unless you're a whiz. With your thoughts, there's so many thoughts running through your head that you'll spin yourself around in circles if you try to solve that quote problem, unquote, in your head. So get it down on paper. What are those thoughts? And then for me, then I started to challenge them. I started to poke at those thoughts. I thought, well, is it true that I suck? Well, not really, like not always. I mean, I do pretty well at a few different things, right? What evidence do I have that I suck? Was my other question. Like, okay, well, what is the evidence here? Like, what am I using to say that this is true? And I went through some of those types of questions, journaled through it. And then that wasn't necessarily the end, because I definitely found some evidence as to things that I didn't do very well. So I had to keep going. I had to go further with it. And I remember getting stuck and asking one of my friends who's an expert in spiritual psychology for feedback on how do you identify your beliefs? How do you break some of these like thought loops that we get stuck in? And she reminded me, and I remember what she said. It was essentially limiting beliefs exist to protect some tender part of you that was hurt in the past. These beliefs act as a shield to keep us from taking actions that might hurt us. To say like, oh, I'd never be able to do that, keeps you from the embarrassment you might experience if you went out and did it and failed at it, essentially, is a good example. So I took that feedback and I asked myself, okay, this just intense negative self-talk, man, things I just never say out loud or to anybody else is just terrible. What purpose do these thoughts serve? Like, when did I start to get this idea that I should be mean to myself? Where did this come from? And I think I even went through a meditation at that point. And I thought back and I was like, where was the first time that I really started just beating myself to oblivion with my thoughts? And I remembered this particular instance. It just came back to my brain. Particular instance where I had set myself up for a talent show. I was about 10 years old. I was singing a Kelly Clarkson song. And I remember practicing it and just thinking to myself, this is too high for me. This doesn't sound very good. It's really hard to sing. But I had so many people who were around me that I loved and trusted, my family, my friends saying, like, you sound great. You sound really good. And so I was like, well, I don't think I sound good in my head, but maybe I do. And so I went on stage and I performed the song and kind of still felt that same way. Like, okay, that was all right. But everybody else says it was good, so it must have been. And I vividly remember the first time I watched the videotape, VHS tape back, and I just felt like I got stabbed in the gut out of embarrassment because I sounded awful. My voice was cracking, way off pitch, like out of sync with the music, just sounded so bad. And from that moment forward, I built this belief that I better be so damn hard on myself because nobody else is going to tell me the truth. Right? It's intense. But that's really where it began, was saving me from embarrassment. So I took that and I played with that idea and I thought, okay, well, what is the embarrassment that I'm afraid of today? Like, I'm not out performing on stages in front of people at this moment in time. What am I so afraid of? Why am I beating myself up on when I get off of a coaching session and make a small error, or when I step on Facebook Live and I kind of say the wrong word? Like, why am I beating myself up so much? And here's what I figured out. I figured out that my biggest fear was that I don't know what I'm talking about. I was like, oh my God, I am afraid of being embarrassed because I don't think I know what I'm talking about. I don't think I actually have the skills or the ability to actually be successful. And a lot of times, you know what this is referred to as? Imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome. I was like, oh my God. All right. So genuinely, at this point in my life, I truly don't think I have what it takes to be successful. Well, all right. Is beating myself into oblivion going to change that? No, it is not. Now, here's the thing. I didn't just start telling myself I'm super capable, I'm Wonder Woman, I can do anything I want. That's what a lot of people think when they try to just do positive affirmations when they are typically very hard on themselves. It just feels like way too big of a gap to leap or bridge. So then I didn't start to say like, okay, I just have imposter syndrome, let's fix it. I said, well, all right, that's helpful feedback. That's helpful background, some awareness, self-awareness. Now, what am I going to do with that? Well, I can't keep beating myself up because it's not only hurting me, it's making our business suffer because for 1 week out of every month or every quarter, like I don't show up at all. And it's hurting my marriage because I'm dumping that negativity on my spouse and that's not fair to him. And it's hurting our dynamic. It's hurting our connection. And so I had all these reasons. But I asked myself, like, I need to break this. So what's my why? Why do I need to stop doing this? And it was very obvious. Like I looked at all the outcomes I was creating through this negative self-talk. Again, thoughts become things. So what were the things I was creating? And then I had to say, well, I can't just remove a belief. I need to replace it with something else. So what can I replace that belief with? What can I believe instead in order to at least start to get some leverage on this, on myself, on this habit, so I can start to break this because it felt so sticky. So here's what I came up with. I was like, well, I can't make the leap to say like, I am this powerful, capable, blah, 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 woman of God. That feels too far and it doesn't actually feel like that's going to help me break the pattern. So what is this new belief? Well, truly, there is no room for self-deprecation on the road to success. What successful person do I know who is just an absolute terror to themselves? Not one. Not one. I don't know a single wildly successful person that I look up to that just thinks that they are the worst person and just absolutely terrible. They have overcome that. And so this was a belief that I could buy into. There is absolutely no room for self-deprecation. If I want to be successful, there's no room for it. It's got to go. And that was powerful enough for me to say, okay, I've got leverage. This is my starting point. This is how I can begin this process. It was a new standard. And basically what happened after this is I just did not allow myself to indulge in self-deprecation anymore. Anytime that I started to go down that rabbit hole and I recognized it, I was like, nope, not allowed. Not allowed. Big red X. We cannot go this way. Dead end. Turn around. So I didn't try to just start loving on myself and being super kind. The first thing I had to do was just stop. Just notice that I was going down that path and say, no, you can't do this. There's no room for this. And so that was where the work really began. And throughout this process, it took about, I would say like a year, quite frankly, honestly, a year and a half maybe, to actually break this pattern to the point where I am today, which I'll explain in a second, happily. But I had to become really, really mindful of the things that I was saying to myself, and I had to consciously remind myself that those things were not helpful. That's not helpful, Lindsay. Okay, you didn't do well on that call. Okay, well, you can't beat yourself up. That's not helpful. So what are you going to do instead? Well, we can break down. We can ask ourselves, what could we have done better? We could ask for some feedback. We could journal about it, but we are not allowed to beat ourselves up. And I also got really curious often. Like I thought to myself, okay, I'm feeling really anxious or I'm feeling kind of overwhelmed. What am I thinking about right now? Like what's going on inside here? What are the thoughts that are running through my head? Or, oh, interesting. Like I wonder where that belief comes from. Like where did that idea come from that like I can't do this? Or maybe I can't do X. Like whatever it was, I just started to get more curious. Those are really the principles for mindfulness, or curiosity, removing the judgment, and just starting to be a little bit even more neutral towards yourself. That's the key. Now, today, my inner dialogue thankfully looks a lot different. And you can probably see it and feel it if you knew me then and you know me now, or maybe, who knows, maybe nobody noticed it but me. But I feel a heck of a lot different. So today, my self-dialogue is much more of, I challenge myself to focus on what I'm great at. I challenge myself to identify my gifts and say, I have charisma. I have this spark. I have this energy. I have a supernatural energy to just love on people and serve people. And I just pour those words of encouragement over myself. And I challenge myself to focus on those things. Now, I am not perfect. And I also have really redefined this idea of perfection. I was such a perfectionist. And that is a toxic pattern as well. So I had to redefine, what is this perfect? What is perfect? Well, if I were to be perfect, I would actually just really focus on loving people. Like, that's my idea of perfection, is always have the other person in mind. Always try to look for what's in their best interest, what's actually going to help them. Try to seek that out, try to find that. And to me now, that's perfect. And I'm not always going to be perfect, but I can always lean into that. And I can say, if I wasn't in alignment with who I want to be, how can I grow from this? And those are a lot of the questions that kind of cycle through my head. How can I get better? What does improvement look like? Okay, what's going really well that I can capitalize on? Okay, what can I do differently? And so I do allow myself to get better. I do allow myself to tell myself the truth, right? When things aren't going well or I'm not showing up or performing. But I don't get stuck in those thought loops anymore. I don't bury myself underneath my errors anymore. And that's all the outcome of changing my self-talk. There's a lot of power in that. Since 2021, I believe that we have tripled our business at a minimum. I am a much better leader. We have hired employees. We have changed so many lives. We've made multiple big moves in our lives. We've hosted massive events. And I don't think that I could do any of that if I was still beating myself to oblivion and hiding from the world when I wasn't doing well. In summary, I want to close this by giving you something that I think will really, really help you. I do hope that this story helps you feel seen. It doesn't make you feel crazy, but there's a lot of people that struggle the same way you do with your self-talk, and there is a way out. There is a way to something better. There is something better waiting for you, but you've got to take control of your mind. And here's how you can start doing that. So basically, that's my story. I hope it's helpful. But here's what you can do with this. You don't have to take the exact same steps, but I actually made a one-page for you, a single page of journaling prompts that you can have in front of you, grab a notebook, and do a little journaling session for yourself on a weekend morning. And this is really something that I encourage you to do if you know your self-talk is detrimental to your quality of life. And maybe at best, it's just keeping you stuck. Right? Which eventually, no progress equals sadness and loss of life. So if you want to get the most out of your life and you want to be kinder to yourself, you want to build your confidence, you want to become the best version of you, you've got to change your thoughts too. So this journaling practice is something that I want you to do and I'm giving to you as a gift. It's what really helped me and I hope it helps you the same way. And what you're going to see in this is basically you got to start building some awareness around your thoughts. Once you do have awareness of your thoughts, then we need to start being a little bit more neutral and maybe even curious about where these thoughts come from and which of them are true and which aren't, which are helpful and which aren't. And then you have to get some leverage on yourself. Like, why do you need to change your thought life? Why do you need to change the way that you see yourself, regardless of whether or not you're at your goal yet? If it's a fitness goal, if it's a business goal, regardless of your circumstances or how far you have or have not come, why do you need to start changing the way you talk to yourself? Get some leverage, because what is your self-talk leading to if you don't? Right? What are the outcomes it's creating? And then I'm also going to help you with identifying some of the triggers that start the spiral of negativity, because you probably don't feel negative about yourself all day, every day. And perhaps if you do, this will be an even better exercise for you because you can really get some leverage on yourself because it's probably really impacting your quality of life. But nonetheless, we're going to identify some triggers of where that spiral starts for you so you can be aware and start to change it. With that said, again, I hope this is helpful. Go download that journaling prompt exercise. It is going to be linked either in the show notes if you're on the podcast or in the comments on YouTube. And do me a favor. This was a very vulnerable share and something that I put a lot of thought into. Like, well, how did I actually start changing this really toxic behavior? And so if it's well received and if it's helpful, do me a favor and screenshot this and tag me on your socials, whether it's Facebook or Instagram. I'm Lindsay Pickowitz everywhere. I would love to hear your thoughts, your takeaways, or even send me a private message. Again, I share this with you so that you can change. So I hope that you take this, and I hope that you can go out and conquer your day. Cheers.